I'm a Hungarian historian, writer, and a documentary filmmaker. Calling back the memories of 1984 and the first years of the 80s, well, the first thing I would think about that I was desperately in love, fell in love with a girl, later on with more girls, and just finished my studies at the university, and I couldn't get a job, or I didn't want to find a job as a teacher of history, for example, in a secondary school. Just to give an overall and general view of the region during those years. Now, as a historian, that time a young man, you know, and a young intellectual, and a member of the Hungarian democratic movement, samizdat, another movement, and I can recall that those years as the gloomy and highly menacing period of the late Cold Era. Why? First of all, it started in 1979 by the aggression again, the Soviet aggression, occupation of Afghanistan. And then thereafter there was this great and promising solidarity movement of the Polish, which was suppressed by a martial law on the 13th of December 1981. And this was a great disillusion for the whole expectations. And don't you forget that this was the period where the two superpowers, after a long debate in the nuclear disarmament, just stopped their negotiations. And it was a very critical period. Why? Because the SALT negotiations to reduce both the American and the Soviet nuclear warheads just stopped, you know, and this whole process started, and the relationship frozen. All the reforms from East Central Europe was halted. And on top of all that, there was an obvious crisis in the whole Soviet bloc, inside the Soviet Union and the Soviet bloc satellite countries, economically, politically, socially, culturally, all the ways. And just one, may I recall your memories that in a 2 years' time, 3 top leaders of the Soviet Union died. Brezhnev, Andropov, Chernenko, these party leaders, and their lives. And it was Gorbachev who only came in the 1985, 1 year later. And so there were fears and very bad feelings and great expectations. And here in Hungary, the democratic opposition was just about to start their activities, and in many ways, the samizdat movement on 1956 memorial demands and similar activities like the solidarity, but less attractive and less wide. Why? Because there was no social support enough. So don't you forget that that after 1956 the Hungarian Revolution was brutally crashed by Russian tanks, you know, and there were 4 or 5 years long reprisals with executions and whatever, and thousands in prison, political prisoners. And that later on, János Kádár, the first secretary of the party, the main leader of the whole period up until 1988, he managed to reconcile and make a deal with most of the society. Just forget about your freedom fight and fight for democracy, and in return I let you live a somewhat better life, more free private life, unless you wouldn't take any political goals and wouldn't intervene. So this worked, and this kind of depoliticization of the country was quite successful. But by the 80s there was a new generation, our generation. I was born in 1956, so I may rightfully call myself a child of the revolution. And although I didn't know much about them, I was 9 months old when it broke out. But for our generation, this compromise with the one-party leader and the Soviet system or the communist system just halted and broke, because there was no stake to get involved and find someone, a young man, a young intellectual especially, in a state school, a state office, or wherever, or a state art, I don't know what. So to make a career, a professional career in a communist country, where there was still censorship. And let me just turn back to the question. My greatest experience and memory is linked to the first Hungarian samizdat book of George Orwell, which was translated and illustrated by me, and which was also bound by me and a couple of friends of mine. And how it started, it was by chance only. I got the English book, from a friend of mine, and I enjoyed it a lot and laughed all the time with the jokes, what the animal farm, the pigs and the cows and all the others, and I really understood it's not a fairy tale as the subtitle put it, Orwell. Well, the animal farm, a fairy tale. It is not a fairy tale. It was a very direct political satire, of a nonsense system. Actually, most of the year I worked with the translation and the illustrations, the illustrations I even enjoyed much than to translate the Orwellian text. But I started right at the beginning of the year and finished by late October. And I had a good friend of mine that time, which was Gábor Denszky, the most courageous member of the Hungarian samizdat movement, the initiator of AB, independent publisher, who published for a decade close to 100 books and many periodicals on his own, mostly, together with Rosika, his wife, who was very active, and we talked to Gábor Denszky, who later on was the mayor of Budapest for 20 years. Now he's politically inactive, and we don't have much close contact, unlike we had in the 80s. And he just came to me, what are you reading? I said, this great book of George Orwell. Oh, it's strictly banned, he's a banned writer, just like Arthur Koestler or Leonid Zamyatin or Solzhenitsyn. Okay, no, I'm ready to publish it with my samizdat publisher, unless you translate it by phone. I said, not only translate, I will illustrate for you. And this was the deal, and without money or with any, okay, but for how much? No, it's just for the sake. Later on in autumn, it was printed, first in 1,500 exemplars. Later on it doubled, and it was all over, multiplied by Xerox and other machines, because it it just turned to become a bloody big success. I mean, relatively, as a samizdat, you know. It was not just for young students and intellectuals, but everybody, you know. It was quite clear, the message of the whole thing. It's a satire of the communist system with all its lies, you know, that the 7 commandments can be rewritten during the night in the shade, you know, day by day, which reminds me of our present day. By the end of this great year of 1984, somewhat before Christmas, we closed ourselves in our room in the downtown, our flat, and made the bindings of 1,500 of this booklet. And by that time, the troubles began. Because later on, as I could be informed, well, many years later, from the secret police, a Hungarian communist secret police, started an action to control us, making this samizdat, because they were informated by spies. Whenever we managed to bind enough staff ready, we secretly made a deal with someone that, okay, there is a taxi station close to our house, and we just take the books there in luggages, in suitcases, and immediately he takes to a secret place, and then return for 3 days and night. Once they were nearly caught. I mean, there were 4 different cars controlling the neighborhood of they knew my name and our address and apartment, and but they finally couldn't. So there are much exciting details. It went on and on, you know. These reports all testified that there were dozens of secret clubs, and this was a main issue to find the brand new Hungarian George Orwell, and later Köstler and other books. But finally we managed to be deconspirated and caught. Although they knew all the participants, it was not only me, but my ex-wife Eva, and my ex-friend István Szentiványi, who later on became a deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs after 1990, Gábor Demszky, who became mayor of Budapest with Rosika. So there were 3 family couples plus the distributors of the samizdat. Anyway, so and it became such a great success that in a half a year time, 3 or 4 more editions of my translation of this Orwell Animal Farm was published in Paris and Chicago, and with my illustrations. And I think this was a real breakthrough as for the Hungarian samizdat movement. As for me, nothing dramatic, but around me, the relatives like my parents, my wife's parents, and even our child, who was that time only 7-year-old, our first child, Jakob, they were secretly interrogated and blackmailed, and they, each and every of them, they never talked directly with me, you know, although I was under an almost constant surveillance, you know, by the secret police. But I didn't have any problem, any trouble. But just let me give an example. My mother or my mother-in-law, who lived in countryside in a small town, you know, one is a librarian, the other one is an accountant were often visited by secret agents and then secret cops, and they were told that if we manage to find another samizdat book printed, just one single one, by your son or son-in-law, we would take their kid away, you know, the small kid, you know, because it's an obvious sign that this young couple, your son and his wife, doesn't care for the kid, dealing with this illegal things and whatever. So. And they were ready. I could read the secret much later, secret reports, and there were instructions for the secret spy. Okay, now you tell them that we are ready to take to state children home their kid, you know, and of course my mother or mother-in-law was frightened by those regular visits, you know, and those tension, and couldn't even dare to tell these secret visits to us. So they were frightened. And they said, "But don't tell them that we were here." Okay, that this was just a message. The censorship still worked in Hungary, but not officially, and there were no lists. There were case by case, time by time, there were some punishments, which were called silencium for 1 year. This author may not publish anything in legal Hungarian papers. Why? Because he happened to give an interview to Radio Free Europe, Hungarian broadcast, in which he criticized the regime. That's all. But no one was sent to prison in the 80s now. Today is the 21st of August, and a hard and difficult year for many millions or billions sometimes. So the world became very unsafe. Our life became very unsafe. And if for anything, the quarantine taught us that hard lesson that we are all social beings. And it is almost impossible to live isolated, all alone. If one would like to acquire a real image, a real thought of what's going on outside in the world, so a real image of reality, and not just by gossips or fake news or government propaganda or whatever. And that is why we organize time by time some protest demonstrations, which is the political conclusion of this, just to find people who feel and think differently. I'm not willing to live among lies. This is what the groceries, you know, from one day another, just realized. Okay, just simply not to live among lies, not to accept lies, not to push any official propaganda in the shop windows of a groceries, you know, or a vegetable shop owner, and this private revolt, one by one. This what really went on during the 80s in Hungary and all other countries at that time existing socialism, as it was called. And now how I feel the present day processes in society and political life and culture worldwide, and here in this tiny country, I'm greatly disturbed, and ambivalent feelings do I have, and I'm not the only one. Many similar friends and people say that the world and this country is not on the right direction, you know, and it is over-dominated by dictators, by greedy people, by propagandists, by political lies, and less human attitude to help those in need, those in poverty, those humiliated. Even a young man or young people could feel isolated and lost in that world. But old generation, I mean elder one, like me and others, who also may feel that some important values of life were distorted, were damaged, were stolen, were forgotten. The propaganda lies and this central media became fiercely professional and working. The state monopolizes all devices, all the printed press, the media, whatever, and change the legal phrase and the elections and the institutional phrase, took the autonomy of all decisive cultural, scientific and artistic bodies. And at the same time there is an enormous poverty that 2/3 of the population lives under or very close to the minimum standard. And there is no hope for the future, and there is no plan for the future. And at the same time the world itself, I mean, just going, dashing to a complete disaster and chaos, you know. Not just neglecting all the great issues, great problems to solve, this pandemia, the climate change, the violations of human rights, and the same. So there are so much values to be saved and to be preserved, you know, by an international and worldwide will, you know. We can really lose a lot, and far more than under the 20th century totalitarian system. So once it's lost, you know, it cannot be revived. I only hope that I will survive some fundamental changes in world policy and Hungarian as well, because it's very inhuman and very dangerous, this trend. That time it was evident that just people, I mean average people, should not pay or should not pay much for any service, because everything is almost for free. Of course it was not that. In our younghood, 70s, 80s, it was normal to live. We as intellectuals, we lived in a bubble, you know. I mean, even the independent ones, and we could read the whole world literature, the best, the classic music, arts, whatever, or scientific works, you know. Of course, there were no internet, there were no websites, and there were no mobile phones, and this made different the human contact, the everyday human contacts, because what is missing from our present day contact, I think, is that the basic, the fundamental feelings, human feelings, what for many thousand years were essential, that there were no communication lines, direct ones. Therefore, waiting to see someone of your beloved, for example, your lover, your son, your parents, you know, far away, or in case of a war or epidemics, people were cut off. And they had to learn waiting. So there were more fundamental feelings, and maybe the word was more naive, which is a great value, to be naive, not knowing about horrible things if not necessary. What we learned a lot from the Romanian society, and not just the Hungarians and the settlers living there. We had very deep links with hundreds of families and schools and church congregations, because they all waited something, you know, to see us as friends, or to have chocolate, to have butter, to have cheese, to have milk for the kids and the like. So the warmth of a traditional society, a rural society, and the multi-ethnic society, for all that the political propaganda and the hatred and nationalistic bias and feelings, and it was very supporting. In this way, we received those volunteers from Hungary who went regularly to Transylvania for many years. We received much more than those who we helped. I mean, to learn how to wait for good things, to learn how to share joy, rejoice, and good things with others, you know, and to secretly cooperate with international lies just to save someone, or someone's memory, or something's memory, and or to liberate someone from the prison of the Securitate. That this learn how to be courageous, outright, how to feel in deep solidarity to all those in need. And life is more than you can imagine from here. And if you are satisfied, well, let's find some other task for yourself, because so many people are living in unsatisfiable situations and in humiliations or in danger, you know. So there is much to do in this short life.